Are we ready? We're almost, okay. Okay. Everyone else seems to be okay. Good evening and welcome. It's time to call our regular meeting of Wednesday, May 17th to order. It's 7 p.m. My mic's on. Oh, the ones on the back? Okay, good. That's why things didn't quieten down when I said, "Are you ready? Are we ready?" Okay, and nobody knew we were. So, calling to order the Wednesday, May 17th, 2017 meeting. It's now 7 o'clock and 30 seconds past. We had an agenda circulated. The order paper for that is not changed. There was an attempt to amend the documentation in it on Friday. Don't worry about that because it was just extra effort. For those who read their agendas quickly, they would have found that the modification agreement was there. So we have an agenda as circulated. A motion to adopt. Councillor Wright, Councillor Seegers. Any omissions, amendments, or deletions at this point? Nothing from staff, nothing from council. All those in favor of adoption? That's carried. And we'll move then to the long-awaited delegation and presentation from the Sunshine Coast Regional Economic Development Organization, SCREDO, and Mr. Chisholm. If you'd like to come forward, make yourself as comfortable as you can in the one chair available. Celia is coming forward too. Okay, but you want to support from the first row and not the third row. That's good. And when you're ready and comfortable, you can push the mic button in front of you once, and I'll turn it on.
Is that on now? All right. I'm not used to being in this chair. I usually do a lot of planning and not a lot of speaking, so we'll see how it goes.
And it'll go very, very well.
We have our slides up there, and this is the button. So the first question, why are we here? A year ago, the 4 municipalities had decided that doing economic development regionally as a group had a lot of benefits. So they constituted a steering committee which went out and recruited 9 of us to get started. Their mission was that we were to be arm's length and independent and choose our structure and to develop a strategic plan. So we've done that. And then we worked out the service agreement coast-wide for the funding, and that required the annual plan review, which is why we're here today. And we all know that this is the first time that we're doing this, so we don't have a lot of protocols to go on. So we're kind of feeling our way through how that works, how the communications work. Right now, when we want to communicate with our funder, we have to send 8 emails, or we're not sure. There's no one point of contact on the other side. There's a dozen. So that's a challenge that we're working through, and we'll see how it goes in the future.
Or 4.
Or 4. Yeah, 4. That's the smallest group. Yeah. So today what we're doing is we're reviewing the annual plan and discussing these kind of overall protocol issues, I guess. So the big ideas that takeaways that we hope for from this is that we have developed a structured, transparent decision-making process for reviewing any initiatives that come to us and proposals made to us or ideas that we generate in-house that we're not flying by the seat of our pants. We've got an audit trail for how we're making our decisions and why. So, 2 years from now, somebody could point back and say, well, that was a reasonable decision at the time, with the information you had. We are deeply community collaborative. For us, collaboration comes before planning. So we're not sitting in a room coming up with ideas and then taking them out to industry or community groups and saying, well, what do you think of our idea? And your feedback is what we call collaboration. It's the other way around. We go out to different sectors and say, well, what have you guys been doing? What do you think you need? And we'll see how it fits into the strategic framework that we've come up with for the coast, and then we'll support the stuff that fits the plan and maybe offer some course corrections to you. But basically working with it's an incredibly strong and diverse civil society on the Sunshine Coast. I don't know if you listen to Almanac on CBC during the day. Every day, 2 or 3 people from the Sunshine Coast. Once a week from Kamloops. Kamloops is huge by comparison, right? Everybody here is really engaged and involved. So we want to. That's an advantage the coast has. We want to work with. And the final point is, we understand the financial diligence that we owe. That we have a public trust for the taxpayer money we're spending through you. We're aware of it every single board meeting we've had. In every discussion that's come up, we got to remember that we have this public trust. So we have a board of directors of, we got everywhere here, right? Board of directors at this point of 8 people who are organized into 3 main program committees. Our focus is, if you've read the strategic plan, our focus is on business development and workforce development, with a smaller committee on regional information coordination. And our definition of workforce development is a broader term than is often used when talking with some economic development professionals. I found when talking to some economic development professionals, workforce development is an input into business. So what do you need? Land, labor, or capital? And our idea was that there is a workforce on the coast. There's families on the coast, youth on the coast, workers on the coast that need support in and of themselves, right? We went back through the transition binder that was given to us by the committee, and we found that feeling was echoed in there. That it's workforce development is an end in itself, not just for driving business growth. So we've developed a number of governance resources to use. We have our charter, which is where all of it starts from. We have our service agreement with you. We have our values and our bylaws. We're developing policies now, and as soon as those policies are carried by our board, they go onto our website, so all of our policies are public. Strategic plan, and then finally the annual plan. That's sort of our ladder of our governance. So far, key policies we've produced of our code of conduct, our conflict of interest, our procurement policies, and our board nomination policy is in development right now, going back and forth. And of course, our structured and transparent approval process, which is what I want to talk about a lot today. Sit like this here. So this chart here, you can see each step and who kind of is in the driver's seat, and then the tools we've developed for that. So the charter is where it all starts. It tells us what to do. The full board went off and developed a strategic plan, 3 to 5 year strategic plan. And then when it comes to annual plans, our program committees will be out in the community working with industry groups to develop the goals for that year. So we'll be communicating to them what our strategic vision is, finding out what their plans were, trying to align those two, coming up with projects that will support that. Those program committees will generate all those ideas from out in the community, put them all into a big hopper, and run them through our scoring matrix. And that's where we'll take all these different, might have a couple dozen project ideas, and this is a preliminary sifting to say, does it agree with our values? Is it efficient based on what we think the inputs are and what the expected outcomes are? There's a whole, I had 5 slides talking about this tool. We can talk about it in detail, but after going through the scoring matrix, that gives us the idea that these projects, the ones that pass that, are the ones that are worth developing a project plan for. Because going through and answering all those questions that you need for a project about project schedules and funding and all that, it takes time and effort, and so you don't want to waste that on every idea that comes in the door. So it's the scoring matrix tells us which ones are worthy of developing project plans for. So once those projects pass that preliminary approval, we work with the proponents and the partners to develop the plan, make sure it hits our planning checklist, it passes muster, and then go back to the board for full approval. Every plan has to have that. The planning checklist, one of the main items is it has to be, what's going to be measured is in the plan, and then there's a constant review process for that. And all right, so the annual plan, which I think you all have, the main caveats are that we've been out collaborating with the community, and every time we try to initiate a conversation, one of the first things we hear is, well, do you guys exist yet? Are you going to happen? I don't think they've tried this before. It just doesn't happen. So why should we, spend time with you? And we have to convince them that no, keep working with us. We need an annual plan in order to happen, and we need these. We need to generate these ideas. And so we have had people engage with us, but that's been a part of the struggle. And we have no staff and no money, right? Till now, we've had no staff and no money. So, and we all have jobs and kids and lives and all the rest of it. So everything's, I've been putting in 20 hours a week for the last couple weeks now on this. So I forgot to set my timer. I'm not sure where I'm at for you. I'm going to leave time for your questions.
We're going to be generous with you tonight.
Okay. So a recap of our strategic goals. We are going to increase the number of growing businesses. We want to increase the number of quality career opportunities and reduce economic disparity. More growing businesses with more better jobs for everyone. That's the strategic goals. That's our budget for this year. Small admin, expectation of payroll. We're in the process for hiring. We're still in discussions internally about exactly what the job description is going to look like. And between more of a community coordinator or an classic economic development executive, or more of a senior manager, what the shape of that job is, we're still in discussions, but we had to pick a number as a reasonable expectation of what quality of staff that we wanted. Within each program, you can see the business retention and the workforce development programs are the bulk of the work. And I had a question before about the reserve. The reserve is that we don't have staff yet, and the staff that we get is probably going to hopefully have a bunch of ideas of their own and some expertise that they can lend us. And some projects will, and also some projects might take off really well and need further support. So it's just the idea of being able to react to what's happening. I'm going to skip over regional info. This is so business retention and expansion. The most economic growth comes from growth of your existing business community, not from attracting Sony Walkman factories or whatever to the coast, right? And that's where a big part of this work is going to be. And workforce development. Workforce development, there's lots of groups out in the coast that work in some aspect of this or another, between the Open Door Group and social services. They work in the sort of place-based programs, and there's some education facilities. But really we're going to be counting on employers to tell us the two sides of it. One is going out to employers and finding out what their needs are. And so far a lot of what we're hearing is, I can't find workers, and I can't find workers partly because of things happening elsewhere in the province, and partly because there's no housing. So housing is an issue that every community meeting I go to, housing comes up. Housing. It's quite astounding. It's a big issue. So that's where that might lead us. And the other side is, so that's sort of employer-led. We want to find out from the employers what skills and training they think they need and workers they need. From our point of view, from a sector-led, we want to focus on technology and soft skills development alternatively. Soft skills are the skills that will help us deal with the new world of AI and machine learning. It's the stuff that's harder to replace. And that's everything from very simple customer service skills up through leadership and governance. It's the whole stack. And so we're looking for opportunities to take advantage of that. Communications. I think we're going to get into questions times. That'll be good. And so, yeah, recap of our big takeaways.
Thank you very much. Clearly, you could have taken a lot more time, and one of the disadvantages of coming to council is that they're a little more formal than our committee meetings. But in the interest of time, I think you were scheduled at this council meeting so we could get the approvals through as opposed to coming to committee. So it might be useful to find time at a committee as well where we could really explore some of these ideas.
I'd welcome that.
Because it sounds pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And you've ticked off all the big ones that we would be happy about. So I'll turn to the council now for a few clarifications and questions and have some discussion, and then we'll move that through. Councillor Mueller first.
Yes, thank you. It's a great start. I'm happy to see that you've got a lot of your structure worked out, and I had a couple questions about that structure. So with the committees, as they are now, you indicated the chair. So who else then sits on those committees?
Well, the terms of reference to those committees allow for people outside of the board to sit on the committees as long as they sign our code of conduct for doing so. So we bring them kind of DMZ inside the tent so they know that they have a duty of confidentiality and others. So, you know, technically anyone.
And so there'd be a recruitment process for that, I guess.
Yeah, so the committee, my personal belief is empowering committees in the structure. So once somebody's got that committee chair, that's their, this is how you know, how you build leadership. It's like, okay, so you're the chair of that committee, go recruit yourself a team, organize them, get the best ideas out of them, find their consensus, bring that back to the board. And, you know, if it passes, you know, if it looks good, you know, we'll take the committee's recommendations. So it's up to the committee chair to recruit as best they can. And so I think if we get good board members, we'll get good committees.
Are you anticipating on having representation from some of the other, you know, you see, like organizations? Because that was one of the things that was highlighted in the report Silas White and I wrote, was the need for synergy.
Yeah.
I'm just curious how that comes into play.
I have that right here, I think, is that a desperate need was expressed frequently for coast-wide leadership to bring together existing groups and resources. And that's from the Steering Committee Outreach Report. And now we've taken that seriously to heart. I mean, I've said that 3 times already today to other people, that what we view our role as is from that regional perspective. We have that strategic framework, and there's groups running in all sorts of different directions. So let's find out the ones that are running in the right direction according to our plan and support them. And if they're not quite, let's bring, you know, course correct them, you know, if we can bring them inside the tent. And groups out there have been, they've been waiting, and they are still waiting. They're excited. They're looking to us, and we've been able to play that role already, getting people aligned before we've had any money or staff or anything, just by existing, just by having that one place for them to look. So
that's fantastic. Yeah. Thanks for your work so far.
And just to clarify that, some of that alignment would be that those groups would sit on the Workforce Development Committee or one of the other committees, or their input would come through the committee structure.
Absolutely, okay. Yeah.
And Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Worship. First of all, thank you for getting this report to us. Some of us have been waiting for a long time, just like you have. I found the work plan pretty generic, okay, and that left me with a little bit of discomfort, because when I look at some of the goals and objectives, I start to think, well, how do I measure success? And for instance, you know, one of the stretch goals you have is encourage new business startups. Well, if you had said encourage new business startups that will increase by 2%, now I have something I can measure. And so as I went through it, that gave me a little bit of, oh, I'm not so sure. How do I know I've succeeded? That's just a comment. Do you have any vacancies on the board
yes,
right now?
We have 2 vacancies today.
And you're planning to fill those, I presume?
Yep.
When do you plan to do that?
Okay, so can I take the first question first, or is that just a comment? Because one of the catch-22s that we're in as well is the whole arm's length deal, where there is about 12 different projects that are in one stage or another of that approval process that you saw, and they each have a lot of documentation, and they have their KPIs and exactly what they tend to achieve. But we didn't think that that's what our funders wanted us to bring to the table today.
Okay.
For this. So, and for the board recruitment process, there's been a number of people that have expressed interest, and I think we're having a meet and greet sometime in the next couple of weeks for volunteers who are interested to come and hang out with us, and you know, just an evening of getting to know what we're about. And then when we have our list, of nominees, we've been instructed to circulate them for comment to the funders. That's the process. So.
Okay. One other question is on your executive committee. I noticed that the executive committee has no budget, and And yet you're going to have to recruit and hire an executive director, and I was just curious how you're going to do that without a budget.
I think that is in the, I'm not sure.
That's really part of payroll in the first year, because we're
Oh,
not gonna
yeah,
have
'cause
a
we're
person all
halfway.
year
That
long,
was-
right? So
yeah.
that's part of getting,
That's right.
everything you need to get to the point of having payroll
Okay.
is also included that in the first year.
We're going to be halfway through the year by the
Because
time.
there's no one sitting in that job tomorrow.
No, that's right. Yeah. No, I was just going through the categories and then going through your budget and putting numbers up against the categories, and found categories that had no budget, and I wondered how you were going to do that. Thank you.
And Councillor Inkster.
Just wanted to start by thanking you and your group, and yourself and Celia and those others that were listed there for doing this. It's going to be a lot of hard work over a number of years, most likely, we hope. And you probably get thanks if there's some successes, and questions if there's some delays and some things. So that's the kind of things that will happen. You probably get the odd pat on the back as well, but not much else other than being able to say maybe in the future we helped create those jobs, which I think is something that you should be proud of if in fact you can do that, and I hope you can. And I'll be proud of you guys for doing that. So I just wanted to convey that, because it may be thankless. It's in a sense like our jobs in a sense, in some ways, but I certainly encourage your group to move forward and work as hard as you can for the people of the coast. In terms of the information that you put here, what I wanted to ask is that a lot of the objectives that you listed, you probably know this from being around and being involved, both of you, tourism and Chamber of Commerce, that a lot of this information is available, and it may just need to be updated in terms of what you've placed here, in terms of your objectives. So the Chambers of Commerce, both of them, Tourism Association, other groups have reports. The District of Sechelt, Town of Gibson's, SCRD, most likely have a number of reports you could access and draw on and probably just update in order to save yourselves the time that you would probably put towards projects. One of the ideas, and maybe it will come to committee for further discussion, is, and it's been proposed in the past, and it's one way to get around, smokestack chasing necessarily, getting away from that kind of economics, which I don't think the Sunshine Coast is necessarily supportive of nor ready for, or maybe it's in our past, is has been proposed in the past, identifying a single project in each community or each portion of the coast, and then identifying how you would then make that project move forward, whether it's identification of land and labor and funding. So just to impart to you, that's an idea that's come up in the past. You've most likely heard it, but I wanted to mention it again because I think it's a good idea.
Hey, thank you. So pats on the back shouldn't be undervalued. It's nice. It's a nice thing to work for. A lot of people work harder for a gold star sometimes than a bump in pay, right? Because recognition is important. So that's,
There's a book just out that talks about that.
Well, it kind of speaks to the board selection as well, as what I was going to say. There's that diversity is one of our key values. So like when we're nominating for the board, we're looking at diversity across lots of dimensions. So geographic for sure, gender, race, economic strata, experience. We don't want, the tendency sometimes you get, if you get too much experience, then you get this top heavy and you don't get a lot of new ideas and you don't get that immediate feedback from, so just take all of that into advisement on that. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Seegers.
I think I beat her.
If you don't mind, you can wait for Councillor Lutz.
Thank you. I too want to say thank you for the work you've done and the work you have ahead of yourselves. When I look at your objectives and goals, I wonder if you are considering any kind of workshops or training for those existing businesses that you want to see grow. I know quite often people in business don't have the opportunity on their own to do that kind of growth. And as a group under you, it might be possible to offer those sorts of things. I'm really concerned about the fact that housing is a detriment for finding and hiring good people. And hopefully over the next few years, we can deal with that as a group also. But I would be interested to hear if you have plans around educationals and
Absolutely, from a number of different angles. So one of the first jobs is, if our strategic goal is to go increase the number of growing businesses, then we need to know how many businesses there are, number one, and we need to know which ones want to grow, because the literature says only 25% of businesses want to grow. The rest are quite happy to be comfortable where they are and stable and independent and whatever. So that's one of the first projects out the door, and we have a project shaped around that to take advantage of groups that are already going and knocking on every business's door. Right? So instead of hiring somebody to go, here's your job, you're going to go visit and census every business on the coast and do the service, let's find people who already want to go to that business's door and talk to them, and we'll just get them to do this at the same time. And part of that same project involves a monthly workshop in each community for business, right? Business peer-led workshops, right? So it's a project they've been doing in Gibson's a lot too. So if you're, we have people who are experts in social media advertising. They put on the workshop of how to advertise on Facebook, the entry-level stuff, some of this stuff, but how to take advantage of cloud accounting, how to protect your digital assets. There's lots of different stuff out there, and that's again harnessing the talent of the businesses that are already there. So that's key. Yeah. I think that's.
And Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I want to commend all of you for hanging in there. I mean, it's been probably a year now since you started. You've done a lot of work behind the scenes, and I think this is the final piece to now actually get you some funds to move things forward. So thank you for what you've done so far. I wanted to ask, did you get the information that Sechelt Innovations had put together?
Not yet.
You haven't got that information yet, okay?
I heard it was under a desk somewhere, but I don't know where. I got a name, but I hadn't get a reply or something. I can't remember.
Okay, so we could perhaps work with that and get that information to you. And then inside of all this, I mean, we all know that on the Sunshine Coast, there are a lot of home-based businesses.
Yes.
We have a lot of consultants who work from home who actually are based here but don't necessarily even work here. How do you plan on incorporating that information into this and perhaps impacting what actually occurs here on the coast and expanding those pieces?
Right. So I've been doing economic development in Gibson's for the town of Gibson's after BCI folded up, and Gibson's is doing its own economic development. And that's one of the biggest challenges is finding all those home-based workers. There was a study that was done a couple of years ago that independent professionals working from home is actually about twice the size of tourism on the Sunshine Coast. And again, finding all those reports and knowing that there's a central repository for them is something we've already started through our website. So it's a challenge to find them, and it's also a class of workers that we were actively recruiting. If you're billing 6 figures to a company in Atlanta and you're spending it here, please move in. That's just fine with me. So the question of how we're going to find them is going to be part of the continuing struggle. I don't have a direct answer if that was the question of how exactly we're going to get them out of their homes and into our database. But maybe it's through the workshops and other activities.
Okay, and I know there was a project that was done recently in Half Moon Bay that looked at some of that, which might...
Right, Wendy Pearson?
Yes.
Yeah, I just met with her the other day to learn what she's been doing with the, again, that's the Sunshine Coast experience of, 3 part-time jobs. So in addition to running the community school, she's been doing the information referral office and doing businesses. So I just started my conversations with her.
Perfect. Okay, and then one final piece. Can we get a copy of your PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, I can send you the full one, because there was a 90-minute version, and I started taking out slides for this 10-minute thing. I realized I probably should have just sent the whole thing. So who do I send it to?
Did it Connie?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sure, and I just have one comment, just because it kind of touches on some of this, that, like I said, we have these 12 projects or more that are in some stage of development, and one of the requirements of our service agreement is that we coordinate with our funders on press releases about major projects. So at some point, very quickly, we need to establish those protocols of who should I call to say, we've got this project, we really want to do something, but we need to announce. So we need to set up these communication protocols of who do I say, here's these 3 projects, which ones are significant and which ones do you want to be involved in press releases on and which ones not. All those sort of, so maybe I should come to that committee sooner rather than later.
Yes, just to answer quickly though, we have a communications department and a communications manager.
Okay.
So all communications can go to Ms. Jordison. we have a Finance, Economic Development, and Cultural Committee. And so this would normally go through our Economic Development Committee, which would be Mr. Stewart, sitting on your right. So between those two, you can funnel everything. The heavy business would go to Mr. Stewart, communications, media, anything like that would go to Ms. Jordison.
Perfect.
And they'll make sure it gets to the right place and inform people. Now, my problem is I'd really like to drill down in a lot of this, so I'm going to invite you to our next committee so we can look at that. But you're saying all the right things that gives me the assurance that I don't have to drill down as much. When you solve income disparity on the coast, we'll give you a real big pat on the back and a handshake. That's a real good one for me. I was concerned about your priority in terms of budgeting for workforce development way more than information, but as you've explained, your community development and your understanding of what that means, my concerns are allied. It doesn't look like you're trying to create jobs for people and people who can fit into jobs. And to follow up on the comments of Councillor Seegers, just to look at your own committee, a board of 7 people, you know them fairly well. How many of them work in a traditional job with an employer where they come in for 35 hours a week and get a T4? Out of the 7.
I don't think any.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. In 1997, I made an address to the Chamber of Commerce about the jobless economy. Yeah. Don't think about jobs as the main way to create wealth in 2017.
It's empowering people to create wealth for themselves.
Exactly. So we're on the same page. Your comments on collaboration, on community, on building from the grassroots up, that's really exciting. We haven't had that kind of democratic stew for a while. And so that's great. I mean, if you can pull this off, it's going to be really, really good. And we'll be there to support you. And we'll end up with a resolution sometime tonight. Pardon? Yeah. Yeah, it's like a strobe light. It actually means Councillor Seeger's phone is going off and they're recording what I say, so it's fine. It's fine. There's a website somewhere that's looking after all of this. Anyways, we're really pleased. We'll be there to support you. If we need a resolution for funding, we'll make sure we get that done tonight as well. And we'll invite you back to a committee meeting where we can actually ask, not about the projects. We don't want to start delving politically into, is there enough in Sechelt? Is there one in Pender Harbor? We don't want to know any of that. We don't want to influence the sectors, but we do want to know the broad sense of how you measure success.
Yes.
What you really mean when you say workforce development, when you actually mean community development. What do you mean by these things? That's what we'd like to talk about, because a year from now, we want to say, hey, it's working.
Well, thank you. I look forward to it. I'm having the time of my life with it, so I'll have no problem spending hours.
That's great. Thanks. Thank you very much. And yes, that didn't exactly fit into our 10-minute delegation approach. However, our next delegation, Mr. Conway, will fit into the 10-minute structure because he's more familiar with our meetings. And we'll ask him to come forward if we can. Good enough. A little bit more. That's the next table.
Good show. These guys are getting good directions.
Yeah, you're doing good.
These on wheels?
No. You'll need to come forward for the microphone, though. It's all ready and set. That's it. So, Mr. Conway, Access Awareness Day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Bill Conway. I chair the Accessibility Advisory Committee for the District of Sechelt. This committee has had the pleasure of serving 4 different councillors, meaning 4 different mayors. And I think there's only a couple of you that haven't been around here that long, for 4 councillors anyway. Our committee have had the opportunity to present to each one of your councils a diversity of recommendations to improve the accessibility for the District of Sechelt, whether it be from transportation to crossing streets, to public and sometimes private complexes, to trails, to roads, to the ultimate safety of a person being able to walk within our community and access the buildings that we wish to do in a safe and inclusive manner. I'm doing this all by memory, inclusive manner. We've done this year with all volunteers. A couple of us do have a disability. I think they tell me I'm blind, and I somehow think most people think I can see. Well, unfortunately, Mr. Mayor and Council, I see nothing. You turn the lights out in here, and I can guide you through this room better than you can walk it. But turn the lights on, you've got the advantage. But all in all, this committee has had the opportunity to really try and shape the access of our area, of the buildings which we reside in and the streets that we walk upon. Sometimes there's situations where we cannot do it and we get bold, or I get bold enough to blindfold a mayor or blindfold a couple of councilors and indicate to them the difficulties that we may have in accessing corners or walking down the street where have a tendency to be a bunch of sandwich boards. What I'm trying to put together here, and by doing so, this committee has provided a number of interesting and informational events throughout the 9 years that this committee has been in existence. I've had the pleasure of sitting as the chair for 8 of those 9 years. I've gone through 4 dogs, but that's another story. And by doing so, sometimes we get things that are really important to us. And coming up the pipeline through your committee and line of paper trail will be a recommendation pertaining to the crossing of Ocean and Cowrie. Yes, there's been some fatalities there, 1 fatality, a person severely injured, and the area is becoming more and more habitable, because we're getting buildings coming up from the top, from Rockwood. That's going to have a lot of people coming up and down the street. And sometimes Cowrie Street is used as a racetrack. So we will be looking forward and seeing some type of motion from this council to assist in the safety of crossing the corner of where your district office currently stands. As I said before, we mostly use or have a number of informational sessions, whether it be Stephanie Gadou coming over here 1 year, telling us how she accessed the Parliament building as a MLA, to Linda Larson, the Parliamentary Secretary for Accessibility for the Province of British Columbia, to other items. This year, we're going to have an information session or table in Trail Bay Mall, where we're going to ask the general public some of the difficulties that they may have in accessing the District of Sechelt, whether it be buildings or crossing the street. We're going to do this by having a map where people will be able to put their dots up on a map for a specific spot, to a suggestion box where they can write down their suggestion and put it in a box, and the committee will review it at their next meeting in June. So basically, I'm asking you here to invite you here to this information table. Put down your ideas on the map or on paper. I will, if you put it in Braille, I'll be the only one that can read it, but you have to ask me to write it for you, though. And that by doing so, we will once again provide an accessible or more accessible community for the patrons in which, or for the citizens in which reside here. As you know, we're becoming an age-friendly citizen community. There's been more and more scooters out there on the roads. I notice them more because of the chief. And I hear them more because some of them tends to be a little noisy nowadays, so I can hear them. They're not like an electric car where you can't hear. But if you lend an ear, you can hear a scooter coming behind you or in front of you. One other thing I'm going to do is to really show how accessible this community is. I'm going to put a GoPro camera on my dog. And I'm going to do it for 2 reasons. 1, to educate the general public on how this dog is trained, on what he is able to do. And 2, for training purposes for my school where the chief comes from, the CNI Incorporated, Morristown, New Jersey. And also it will be provided towards Canadian Standard Boards that will be creating the standards of these dogs for the country of Canada. So I'm hoping, Mr. Mayor and councilors, that you come across our information table and present to us some of your ideas to improve the accessibility of your community, and where you may have difficulty in accessing a particular building or store. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I'll take any questions you want.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for the 8 years of work that you've given our community in advance. We see Councillor Inkster is first one with comments. You want to turn your...
Thanks, Bill. You just referencing the crosswalk area. I think there's 1 to 2 off to my right, off to your left here out as you leave here. I guess with your dog, you cross there and you identified it as a problem. I know a number of years ago when we did the blindfold walk that we identified the need for more letdowns.
Yes.
Everywhere, because those are hard to step off of and or come up on, and that includes the motorized carts you're referring to. And I do hope electric cars start coming with, or they already do come with a device on the front that the dog hears. Do they not?
No.
Oh, they probably should start adding those. So do you know what I mean, right?
Yes, I do.
The dog picks up the pitch. They should start putting those on those cars. They'll probably be asked to, requested to. But the other thing is with this crosswalk area, do you think that you're coming forward with a plan, but do you think a simple curb extension would help with crossing problems?
Actually, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Inkster, I think a stop sign would be the most appropriate thing. I won't ask for a stoplight because that's $250,000 on sale. And Councillor Wright doesn't like big numbers like that.
No, but he likes safety. He likes citizen safety, so we might be able to find a compromise.
Yes. So I think the stop sign is the most practical and most efficient and most economical, and it can be done tomorrow if you put your mind to it.
Good. And Councillor Mueller has a comment.
Councillor Mueller.
Yes, thank you. Just a comment. I've had the pleasure of sitting on that committee with you, Bill, as a liaison. It's been great. It's been a real education in terms of how these issues around access really impact our community. And I just wanted to thank your team there for the work you put into this. And I know this is the second time you've done it. Was it the third? Was it the second?
For what?
The Access Awareness Day.
Be about my 7th.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
So
yes, Mr. Mueller, Councillor Mueller.
Right. So I missed the first few because I wasn't here. But
you weren't on council. You weren't on council.
All right. Well, thanks again. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. The only thing, Mr. Mayor, if I may do so, the Minister of Sport and Persons with Disability sent out just on Friday. Unfortunately, I was a minute late and a day short of getting it into your package of National Access Awareness Week. And that was put out by the Minister herself, Caller Cockrell, an MP from the Lower Mainland, who just happens to be visually impaired. So that's Access Awareness Week from May 28th to June 3rd, and that is the same day that we're going to have our information
Good.
day. So.
And it shows that access to positions of power are not limited by ability. That's great.
Oh, definitely not.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
And if I could ask Councillor Lutz to do the proclamations for us, so I can leave the room for a minute.
Seeing as I have the microphone, I too would like to thank Bill for all his work over the years. I did sit on that committee and I too learned an awful lot. It's an important committee for our community, so thank you. Our first proclamation is Intergenerational Day, June 1st, 2017. Whereas Intergenerational Day is meant to raise awareness about the simplicity and power of intergenerational connections. And therefore, whereas Intergenerational Day does not require funding, time, or extensive planning, simply the energy to smile at someone from a different generation and to hopefully receive a smile in return. Now therefore, I, Alice Lutz, do hereby proclaim that June 1st, 2017 shall be known as Intergenerational Day in the District of Sechelt. And we actually do have a proclamation around Access Awareness Day for June 3rd, 2017. Whereas accessibility and inclusion is essential for ensuring that all community members have equity in opportunities and the ability to fully participate in community life. And whereas we all have a role to play ensuring that our communities are accessible and inclusive as possible. Now, therefore, I, Alice Lutz, Deputy Mayor, do proclaim that June 3rd, 2017 shall be known as Access Awareness Day in the District of Sechelt. And our third one, and I think these three all really go together, Seniors Week, June 4th to the 10th, 2017. Whereas Sechelt is fortunate to have a diverse and growing population of senior citizens that are active in support of each other and our community as a whole. And whereas Sechelt is committed to ensuring that the voices of seniors are heard and that seniors are valued as partners in shaping the future of our community. Now, therefore, I, Alice Lutz, Deputy Mayor, do proclaim that June 4th to the 10th, 2017 shall be known as Seniors Week in the District of Sechelt. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. If we could move to item 5 and 5.1, minutes of the afternoon meeting on Wednesday, May 3rd. Motion to receive and adopt. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Wright. Any errors or omissions? All those in favor? That's carried. And item 5.2, minutes of the 7 p.m. regular council meeting of May 3rd. A motion to receive. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Inkster. Any errors or omissions in those? I would draw attention to the page 15, page 2 of the minutes, the second bullet in discussion. It says no complaints regarding geese at Blue Ocean Golf Course. I would actually put that in, I delete at Blue Ocean Golf Course. We have had lots of complaints from the golfers, and I think they may misunderstand what that was intended. So we've had no complaints regarding geese on other fields or golf courses that have been reported to the District of Sechelt, but we have had them from Blue Ocean. We don't want to appear to be entirely deaf. Hearing no other errors or omissions, a motion to adopt as amended. Councillor Seegers and Lutz, all those in favor? That's carried. And finally, the minutes of the special council meeting of May 10th, which was the adoption of the finance. Motion to receive and adopt. Councillor Wright, Councillor Seegers. Any errors or omissions there? All those in favor? And that's carried. Moving to our committee meeting minutes and reports, 7.1 is minutes of the Planning and Community Development Committee. Motion to receive, Councillor Wright, Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? And any errors or omissions or any of those that we'd like to pull out? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on page 33, third bullet from the bottom, it's the Sunshine Coast Regional Economic Development Organization, not corporation. And the same would be on page 34, item P. Thank you.
Okay, it's not a corporation?
No.
Good. And any of those recommendations need to be pulled out for separate discussion, or are we okay with all of them? Somebody from planning? In that case, I'd look for a motion to adopt the recommendations coming out of that. Recommendations 1 through 7. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz, all those in favor? That's carried. And I didn't ask about business arising from the previous council meeting minutes, so I'll go back just to check. Nobody caught me, so I assume you didn't have anything arising from those. And I thought of it because I have a question just arising from those minutes. And that's on page 31, and it actually comes from the minutes of the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Pardon? Sorry. On page 31, I'd had a question about the bullet in the discussion under recommendation number 2, that the minutes included a request from the AAC for the Chief Administrative Officer to call a meeting of mayor and all committees, and I wasn't quite sure what that was, but I will hope that the CAO will follow up and let me know and check with the committee on what was intended there. Oh, Councillor Mueller.
So this is an item that's popped up a few times now. It was just it was an initiative coming out of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, specifically from the chair requesting a regular meeting with the mayor just to discuss their role in the process and issues that arise around the governing of that body, and it was to include other advisory committees as well, not just the Accessibility Advisory Committee.
Good
so
idea.
just a regular checkup.
Yeah. So it's a point of communication?
Yes.
And a place to have that structured as opposed to not happening at all?
Right, and just a regular thing, so.
We can do that. That sounds like a good idea. Okay, thank you. Moving then to item 7.2, which is the minutes of the Finance, Culture, and Economic Development Committee of May 10th. Motion to receive, Councillor Wright and Seegers. Any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Receipt, that's okay. So then looking for the recommendations. Anything that needs to be pulled out? And if not, I'll look for a motion to adopt the recommendations 2 through 6. Councillor Lutz, Councillor Inkster. All those in favor? That's carried. There are no bylaws tonight, no new business. We have business items. We'll move to item 10.1, which is the Integrated Community Sustainability Plan Advisory Committee. Motion to receive the report. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? And we'll turn now to the Director of Planning and many other things to report. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is simply being brought forward basically to bring in the recommendations from the Planning Committee. So it was to include the 3 new positions that were added and also to change the terms of reference as requested by the Planning Committee to add the requirement that the committee members be familiar with the OCP and other vision documents. So in some ways, it's perhaps moot because you've endorsed the same recommendation from the Planning Committee minutes, but
this has the detail in it.
It was to bring it forward. But and in light of Councillor Wright's comment, I should note on page 41, item P should be Sunshine Coast Regional Economic Organization as well in there as well.
Okay, I'll look for somebody to move recommendations 2, 3, and 4, and then we can have some discussion. Councillor Mueller, Councillor Shanks, and discussion. I noticed Councillor Mueller.
Yes, thank you. Perhaps I missed it in here. There was an important discussion about the OCP and familiarity of it, but I'm not seeing it listed in the terms of references here. And maybe I'm just missing it.
I think it's page 45. It's the second bullet. I believe that just says to review and understand the background reference materials, including existing community plans, was meant to encompass all of those.
Okay, so maybe that's a question then to the mayor, if he feels that's strong enough. Really, we felt at the planning committee that those really need to be highlighted, they need to be front and center when this committee does its work. So
Yeah, I saw that in the minutes, so let me just look at the minutes again.
whether we want to explicitly name the plans that we're intending that any of the participants would have read and be familiar with, something that I might be more comfortable with.
Certainly, if
they're
council
specifically named.
if council wants to do that, then a motion to amend those terms of reference to specifically identify the official community plan, the vision statement, and any others would be in order. Councillor Inkster.
Okay, so I'm glad we're being really specific with those documents, considering what we've been indicating over the last couple of years about what's important to have had read when you're working at the district end or otherwise. The important documents that have a lot of citizens put work into. So if we were to say the community plan, the vision documents, and reference documents within those plans, or would that be then too broad ranging?
No, I think if you want specific documents, put the name in.
Okay.
That's the motion that we should look for. So just tell me we've got the official community plan, the vision document, or is that what it's called? Document? Vision plan. It's a vision plan.
Yeah, I think the big three that were referenced were the OCP, the vision plan, and the sustainability plan. All
Sustainability
three.
plan, yeah.
Okay, the
And
sustainability
perhaps, now that we're thinking about it,
The integrated.
the liquid waste management plan or these associated plans. I don't want to give this group too much work. That's 700
Those ones we can
pages.
just use as reference.
Okay.
Keep those in reference, but those three were important to people, so let's name those. So that's a motion put forward by Councillor Mueller, seconded by Councillor Inkster. Any discussion? We've got the ones we want. Councillor Mueller?
Well, I just wanted to say, in my time here, I often refer to those plans. I think they're, for myself at least, they're the Magna Carta of what we do around this table and what we're trying to provide for the community. I think that's fantastic work done during Mayor Inkster's era. I give you a nod there to come up with these community plans that I think really have a lot of depth to them and represent something that is good for Sechelt.
Okay, any other discussion of the motions in front of us? I would just make a comment about we did get one letter that was concerned about whether transportation would be considered, and I think it's important. I was going to ask that the planner that's sort of spearheading this or has this on their file is make sure we write a letter that we can address or comes through my office or through the communications that explains to people that the advisory committee is meant to be general and all of those issues will focus through that. Of course, transportation is very important as are other issues, and that we're looking for active groups in the community that have a broader vision and can speak to a number of aspects on sustainability. Though I did notice that there was 3 business communities and only 1 conservation environmental community on a sustainability committee, so I hope they can hold their weight. Any other discussion? In that case, all those in favor of the recommendations? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you for that and for the work. Item 10.2, rural dividend grant application coming from Ben Curry, Manager of Financial Services. First, a motion that it be received. Councillor Lutz, Councillor Inkster. All those in favor? And Mr. Stewart will speak to this briefly as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the purpose of this report is to seek council authorization to submit an application for the BC Rural Dividend Program for the funding for the gazebo program in Mission Point Park that's included currently in the 2018 capital plan. The plan here would be if we can get approval for the funding now, we can ensure that it's included in the capital plan with the funding guaranteed at that point and get it completed in 2018.
Okay. And Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. I know one of the things that we've talked about whenever this project has come before us is power and lights. So I don't see any reference to that in here in either the budget items, line items, or any of the reports. Is that something else that will be addressed going forward?
Yes, Your Worship, I believe Parks would be addressing that as required. It may depend often where the actual gazebo is located in the park, I believe. It'll be brought forward as a capital project in 2018, certainly for full review of the business case as part of the capital budget deliberations. But at least by that point, we'll know if the grant application has been successful or not.
Okay, and Councillor Lutz?
I'm having a bit of trouble with this one. I do hope that we can have a gazebo at Mission Point Park, but I think we're moving too fast. We haven't had the consultation with the community as to what it should look like, how big it should be, where it should be located. Should it have a backstop for be a band shell? Should it just be an open gazebo? I just think from what I can see of the grant application, we don't have to have it in that quickly. And we can even go to a higher ask if that's what the plans from the community show. So I'm just not in favor of chasing these dollars. I would rather we get what we want and what the community wants at that park before we move on this.
The chicken and the egg on this one. We want to see if there's funding available to move forward, but as you say, we may not know exactly what our final design is, but we're not going to know that until we get into 2018. So, Councillor Inkster, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I thought there was other hands and/or lights going on, so I thought I'd step up to the plate on this one. This is just an application for money. I'm glad that staff did the work on it. It's a surprise to me. I'm happily a surprise to me to see looking at funding opportunities. If in fact we can't put a plan together, most likely we would just lose the funding as has happened before in many municipalities, and I believe with the District of Sechelt a number of years ago with airport funding. So that happens. The community, though, has had some input on the location of the bandstand, their preferential location, the Davis Bay community. If the wider community has to be involved while we're applying for this funding, we just need to move in that direction, has been directed, because we have approved funding for that, and it's in this budget. The terms of how the gazebo will look, well, this money looks like it would cover most of those desires. Once again, if we want to get a more finite and clear project look and design, we just have to go out to the community as has been approved in our budget over the next number of months while we wait for this funding to be approved. I think that council has indicated strong support for 2018. Now, if in fact that was just, there wasn't a sincere level of support, I didn't detect that. I think that there was support there for looking at 2018, that this will line up this funding and the plan very clearly with that. So I'm prepared to very strongly support an application that goes and looks for money that doesn't have to come from the taxpayers of the District of Sechelt.
Thank you, and Councillor Seegers.
I have to say I agree with Councillor Inkster. I want to commend staff for taking initiative and looking for this source of funds. Again, if we have time between now and 2018 to do the necessary consultation with the community to see where and what we're going to build. This is a concept at this point, and it's sufficient to be able to go to the funders for potential grants. So I'm totally in support of this.
Thank you. And Councillor Lutz, I think part of the problem is that Photoshop and computer-assisted design is far too available and easy at the moment, so people put things together. So if you look at the back page, you may say, well, that's actually in the wrong location, dead center of the green space, and it might not be the right design. But it's just, would it be better if it was in sketched? But they look very permanent when they come out as photographs in that nature, and I don't think that was the intention. That's still lots of work to do before we get to approving any particular gazebo on that. And Councillor Mueller?
Yes, just a question. We know that we have more work to do on this particular item if we are approved funding and we want to move ahead with the project. When do we envision that work's going to happen? When in the next year are we going to do that? And where and how would that work?
Some of it will take place during the budget process for 2018 as we solidify what's in the financial plan and the business cases for those items come forward. Some of that work will include determining exactly what's going to be there. So at this point, it's a concept. It should be done, if the capital is going to be spent in 2018, then it should be done before 2018.
So the deadline would be budget time, but we would expect staff portion of it to be done
Between
in
now
the
and
next 6 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Over the next 6 months. And staff have been, let's be clear here, the manager of financial services is coming forward because we put something in the financial plan and he's looking at ways we may be able to find costs for that. Staff have been instructed not to chase dollars, and then he's not doing that. They're not chasing dollars and then coming and say, would you like to do this project? And I didn't realize we'd been quite that firm. I raised an issue the other day and staff looked at me and said, well, we can't chase dollars. And so,
That's true.
and I said, that's true. That's true. But so we'll talk about how we get feasibility studies and other things moving forward without staff doing the inappropriate chasing of money. It's like chasing smokestacks for economic development. We don't want to do it.
So with that answer, then I'm pleased to say that I'll support this, and the reason is because I specifically like to support events in the District of Sechelt. I think every time we can get together, this provides another venue for that to happen in a great location. So I'm looking forward to the next iteration.
Any further discussion before we call the vote on the recommendation? Oh, actually, we need to put on the floor that council approves the submission. So somebody to make that motion. Councillor Inkster, I know, was enthusiastic. Councillor Seegers agreed with him, so that'll be the second. And any further discussion? All those in favor? That's carried
Can I just
unanimously.
can I add something just to, not to the vote itself, just the idea?
Vote's over.
Pardon?
Go ahead.
Thank you. It was mentioned earlier talking about power plans for this one. Once again, I would say to the district, to council, and to staff that this might be an opportunity because of the size of the roof and the time of year that it will most likely need power, that we look at solar. It's another opportunity. Now, we may have to have some sort of backup power system, which may negate the purpose, but I'm just saying that we could probably put solar on the roof of this. There's lots more information coming out all the time about solar, so solar, solar, solar.
We'll check the location in the trees.
Yeah,
and then
great.
Make that determination.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to 10.3. First, motion to receive the report. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Wright. Braithwaite Airport license modification. All those in favor? And Mr. Stewart will speak briefly to this. Oh, I'm sorry. Corporate officer. I didn't.
Thank you. Your Worship,
I got misled because Mr. Stewart earlier said, I'll be speaking to these items, and I thought he meant everything in 10. So.
well, he's welcome to speak to it if he wishes. Your Worship, this is, as set out in my report, we received a request from one of the licensees to this particular airport agreement, requesting that we make some slight modifications to the licensee names as set out here in the report. So this is in front of council for consideration of approving the modification agreement that's attached and authorizing execution.
Okay. The agreement is page 54, 55. First, then the motion for recommendation 2. Can we get it on the floor? Thanks, Councillor Mueller. Seconded by Councillor Wright. Questions, Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. I read your report. I don't see anything mentioned here indicating that, is it Mr. McNicol? Is that how you say his name? That he has actually taken part in any of the discussions or provided any written support, written information.
Approval?
A support of being added to the lease. So what I'm reading is we have somebody coming forward saying add this fellow to the lease,
Right.
but I don't see anything in there. Do we have any information on that?
Yes, I should have included that. The emails that I've received several back and forth, or we've gone back and forth, have always been CC'd to Mr. McNeely, and as well, I've included Mr. McNeely's signature on the back of the modification agreement, so he will be signing that as part of his approval, as part of it.
He will need to sign it.
He will
before
need
it
to
becomes
sign.
complete.
You will need to sign it. Yes, okay, so in the report, though, I didn't see that he actually wanted to be a part of this.
Yes, so he was CC'd. In the communications we've had in email, I've confirmed he does, but I omitted it from the report. Sorry about that.
Thank you very
But we will make sure he signs this agreement too.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you for that. And we move then to reports from councillors. I'll start on my far left with Councillor Shanks. Any reports?
Actually, I have absolutely nothing to report, Your Worship, as I wasn't here last Wednesday for all the committee meetings. Sorry.
That was quick. Thank you very much. Councillor Inkster.
Just a couple of quick mentions. I was at the very successful annual hundreds of people Botanical Gardens plant sale, and I was there for a while, and I would encourage council members to always, it's always funny when you say that. I would encourage council members to go there if they can every year, because it's a contribution to the Botanical Garden, but it's also a good way to get your garden ready for the spring and summer. And I just always hope next year they have more fruit trees, that's all, because I like edible gardens. And then I wanted to mention too as well the last Wednesday, I think it was last Wednesday, the lengthy day we had to talk about planning. And that's always good to get and delve into the planning function and some of the rules around it within the District of Sechelt, and what council needs to consider, and all the documentation that came with that was really important. Just wanted to mention those two items. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Your Worship. Attended the annual general meeting for the Sunshine Community Forest Finance Committee, the planning workshop, and then I had a tour of the Chapman Lake Water Treatment Plant. Quite interesting. Works very much like our wastewater treatment plant, but slightly different. But anyway, the water comes out just as clean at the other end, and so that was kind of interesting. And of course, there was lots of discussion on that tour, because there was a number of people there, about 22, 23 people, and lots of discussion about water. And so, and on that note, well, I'll leave it till the regional district report. Thank you. That concludes it.
Thank you. I was going to ask if any minds were changed in that discussion. Councillor Seegers.
No.
Thank you. I too attended the AGM for the Sunshine Coast Community Forest, as did I think almost all of the councillors here. The planning workshop, thank you to staff for putting that on. It's very informative, and we could probably repeat it at least once a year. It would come in handy. And then I attended a library board meeting on the weekend, and we have a new member coming forward to be on the board, was originally on the Powell River Community or Library Board, has moved down to the area now. And she told a little story at the meeting. She said that Powell River during that time was looking to attract new businesses to the community. One of the businesses came early to their meeting with the municipal government and first toured the library. And then they went upstairs and said, I'm sorry, we don't want to come to your community, because if your library is representative of your culture, we don't want to be here. And they left. So that was an eye-opener and a note to the rest of the board. I just want to make a note to everybody here and anybody listening to remember to go to the SCRD Community Dialogues happening tomorrow in Sechelt at the Seaside Center from 3:30 to 5:30. If you have any questions on any of the services provided by the SCRD, it's your time to voice them. Thanks.
And Councillor Mueller.
Yes, thank you. In the past 2 weeks, I attended the regular council agenda, like the other councillors. I attended the Community Forest Annual General Meeting, this time as a shareholder designate. I got to take part of the meetings, vote and receive. Somewhat just a procedural matter, but it was good to be there and just see the interaction. I think there's an emerging conversation in BC around community forests. It's something that we've seen at previous UBCMs, and I know that it's coming back at our next year's UBCM with potentially some resolutions attached to it. We have a fantastic community resource in the community forests, and we need to have more discussions about how exactly we want that to be currently and moving forward. This time of year, as last year, in all my travels around the district, I can't help but notice just how fantastic the town looks. Every time at this time of year when you've got the flowering shrubs and the trees coming out, it really does look good. I can say with certainty that the district is actually looking better since I moved here, far, far better, the downtown core. And the only thing I can really point to, and I get this feeling every year, is it's the number of boulevard trees and the number of plants and gardens that have been planted. And, you get to a certain point with the manicured landscape, eventually you really do start to feel like a holiday place. And I feel like that in Sechelt lately. It just looks fantastic around town. So I like to make that mention to the people that are planting and maintaining the boulevard trees, and as well to our Parks and Public Works staff that maintain this landscape, because it really is fantastic. But I wanted to finish off my council report just to make a mention of the ongoing public health crisis that is associated with fentanyl and opioids. It was in January of this year that we were warned in a letter from our Coast Reporter Zone, Sean Eckford, about the presence of fentanyl in the district of Sechelt and across the coast. It hasn't gotten any less serious since then. Last year there were attributable 6 deaths. That's significant. It's something that we all need to really take seriously. This is one of those things where we all have to come together and just start to have the conversation. This is like nothing we've ever seen. And in these days and age, it's a completely different landscape. And if you have any reason to think you might be coming in contact with this substance, you need to carry a naloxone kit and be serious about telling your friends and family to do the same. It's just gotten a little bit too serious, and I think we all need to be aware of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mueller, for those two very different comments. First, the change in our landscape over the years, and it reminded me of when we moved here and everything was gravel and nobody had any yards and there's no sidewalks. Things really do change over time if you're patient, but the more serious issue of fentanyl. And Councillor Lutz.
Thank you. I had the honor of representing the District of Sechelt with a letter of distinction for Bertie Hall, whose 100th birthday was on the weekend. Bertie had volunteered for 37 years with the local hospital auxiliary. And from everything her friends had to say, she was my kind of woman, pretty feisty. Always told it like it is, they said. She had also served as a nurse during the war years. And because of that history, she was part of the memory project that was done by the federal government, recording stories of people involved in the war. So I went online and read her story, and it was very interesting. And there are a lot there if anyone's interested. It's the memoryproject.net, and you hit people's names to get their stories. So that was a privilege to do that. I also attended the other committee meetings through the week and the annual general meeting for the community forest. Always an interesting evening. And I think our board represents us well when they come forward to the community with that meeting. I also had an interesting meeting with some members of the community who had some real concerns around disaster preparedness. So I shared with them what information I could that Bill Elsner has available, and they will probably contact him. So that was my 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for standing in for me at the celebrations for Birdie Hall. I'll just go forward in terms of a very brief report to let the community and anyone watching and councillors to remind them that next week the Chamber of Commerce has invited the mayor for his annual address, this time a luncheon. I think it's Tuesday, the 23rd. And I'll be talking a little bit of an update on Sechelt, our organization, a little bit of an update on our finances from the budget, and more importantly, some discussion of our economic direction. And we'll want to drill down a little bit on what it really means to have seniors as one of the pillars of our economy, because I think it's quite misunderstood in lots of ways. So a little bit of economic and a little bit of District of Sechelt State of the Union address for that. And if council will oblige, Councillor Seegers reminded me that I said we'd come back to Scredo during the business items and didn't. So we can amend the agenda if there's unanimous consent. And so I'd look for a motion to amend the agenda to return to business items to deal with the Scredo annual plan. Councillor Seegers and Mueller. Any objections? All in favor? Okay, that's carried. And then I would look for the motion we should have looked for earlier, and I'm not sure if we need it, but I think we should say that Council approves the Scredo annual plan and confirms our financial contribution to their success, because it's the approval of the plan that we need in writing before we can release the funds. So, Councillor Seegers and Mueller again. Any discussion? All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Sorry, it took a while. We could have done it earlier, but thank you for being patient. And moving to 11.2, back on schedule, the SCRD board and the representative director's report.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Attended the agenda planning meeting for the Planning and Development Committee, and then attended the Planning and Development Committee meeting and a board meeting. And I went to the community dialogue in Gibson on Monday night, because as you know, as Councillor Seeger mentioned, there is a community dialogue here in Sechelt tomorrow. And one of the things that always puzzles me, I would have to say that of every two people I meet, one of them will ask me about what's the District of Sechelt doing about water. And it always amazes me that our citizens don't know who supplies what services. And so I would really encourage people, councillors, whoever would like to go to the dialogue tomorrow. It's at the Seaside Center, and it's at 3:30. It goes on till 7 o'clock. So it's a good opportunity to go around to all the tables and talk about water or planning or whatever you want to do at that area. Having said that, there are a couple of reports of interest. I'll pass them on to our CAO. Things that are happening at the regional district is they've got a short-term rental public engagement report in terms of what they're planning on doing. And I've asterisked those on there for the CAO. And they're also going to do a building bylaw review, which is an interesting report. So those are the two reports that are of the most significance. The rest were just run-of-the-mill reports, okay? And they're all included if anybody would like to see them. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And the thing to note about in our day-to-day interactions with citizens up and down the coast, no, they don't know the difference between the municipality and the SCRD. I get letters from Half Moon Bay, Pender Harbor, asking me to intervene and help solve their issues. And we get citizens in our own community that don't know. On the other hand, when we do our randomized telephone surveys and ask people, they think they know the difference. They're very clear. At least 70% say with certainty we know the difference between the two. So people's opinions of their knowledge and their actual is something else. Now, 11.3, appointment of the Sunshine Coast Regional District Board Director and Alternate Director. It's coming to the end of Councillor Wright's term as a director at the end of May, which means that for June 1st through to December. And I don't have a resolution in front of me with the exact dates, but it is a June to December appointment to appoint Councillor Inkster, who has been the alternate, as the director for that period of time. And the next alternate would be Councillor Shanks. Moved by the current director, seconded by Councillor Lutz. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And we look forward to a peaceful transition of your duties. Item 12, Sechelt Visitor Statistics, April 2017. And actually, motion to receive. Councillor Lutz, Councillor Seegers. All those in favor? Any discussion of those? We can come back if you want. Motion to receive the RCMP statistics. Councillor Seegers and Councillor Wright. All those in favor? And Councillor Inkster was thinking about these this afternoon. Hope it doesn't change our opinions. And council correspondence, motion to receive. Councillor Lutz, Councillor Seegers, all those in favor? Any of those people would like to draw attention to? Aside from the ones that have already been responded to. I noticed the one from Katie Capel on the Lawn Bowling Club. Hopefully we can make sure she gets something in time for their AGM next week. It won't be an easy letter. It'll be a very easy letter to write, but it won't be one that I'll want to sign, but I will. Nothing much is happening. It's not in the business plan. It's not in the 2018 plan, unfortunately. Any others? Councillor Mueller?
Well, I'm just wondering if maybe we should have the discussion around a letter for support for the construction of the pods.
Oh, yes.
It is there, and I think it perhaps merits a bit of discussion simply because a letter of support is usually followed by a request for funding in my world. So I'm just curious how council feels about that at this point, and some response would be necessary, I think.
Yeah. Well, we're a day or two late from their actual request. They wanted it by May 12th, which is why we didn't prepare anything, but I think it's important to support or determine whether we should support that kind of an initiative. In my view, just to say, I think it's a very significant development on the coast, probably more significant than the Gibson's public market, but of equal kind of play. And it's something that will go forward, I hope. And I think we would deal with support and funding as two separate.
Thank you. I note in their letter that they say that they're currently making applications for grants to assist with the cost. And typically when you do a grant application, you want letters of support from the various governments, other organizations in the area. So I'd be in support of writing them a letter.
Take that as a motion. Okay, Councillor Lutz. And now further discussion about the concerns or what the letter of support may indicate. Councillor Mueller?
I believe that was seconded, right, by somebody?
Pardon? Yes.
Okay. Yeah, with this particular one, it's when we had the back and forth around the Gibson's public market.
Yes.
It started, I believe, as a letter of support, and then it came back multiple asks for funding. And I was concerned with that project, never having done a market analysis or any type of analysis around the type of investment they were talking about. And in this one in particular, Pender Harbor being up there with a limited market and a little limited catchment area, I think it's doubly important that we get that kind of work done if we're going to support this. It's a large investment for that community, $3+ million or whatever right now it's being forecasted to. And Pender Harbor is always a community that's struggled to support anything of that size. Be it a grocery store or not, so I want to see them move ahead, but I don't want this council to think that that because they wrote the letter that they then have to fork over the money.
I think there will be requests through the community forest for this, without any question, depending on how much of a dividend the community forest can provide to the community for their legacy grants. There'll be some of that. I'm quite confident that Mr. Jackson and the work they've done at the Lagoon Society over the last decade, but over the last 5 years in particular, puts them they're very well connected regionally. And so this is not just a Pender Harbor initiative. This will be a regional meaning lower mainland, southwestern BC project. And I can remember when the Lagoon Society started and they started to make real waves. Many of us south of Pender Harbor were concerned that they were using up all the oxygen in the grant rooms because they were getting a lot of money and doing very, very well. They've got some very good skilled people associated there. And I think Pender Harbor is benefiting from the retirement of some very high capacity and competent people in that area now. So they may be able to fund this themselves. Councillor Lutz?
I certainly would support it on a philosophical level at this stage. I think that what I've seen of their plans, it will be well used, not necessarily just by the local education system, but an awful lot of off-coast. And the fact that they're somewhat isolated, I think will work well in their favor for conferences and other such endeavors. So I have no problem giving a letter of support for this particular plan.
Okay. Any other discussion, Councillor Shanks?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out, Your Worship, item number 9 from the SDBA. I did take the liberty of sending a reply back indicating this was an executive meeting where that decision was made to send this letter, and perhaps if they had talked with their liaison personnel or a senior member of staff in the planning department, it would have been made perfectly clear why we had to take those items back to third reading. And I've been struggling for quite some time to make them more aware of our OCPs and our vision documents and other planning issues. And I hope that over a period of time, they'll take the necessary avenues to ask the questions before sending future letters like this.
Thank you, Councillor Shanks. I appreciated your email reply and was disappointed at the SBDA's letter. Can we go back to the Pender Harbor Ocean Discovery Station? We did have a motion that we write that letter, and I didn't get a vote on that. So if there's any further discussion, all those in favor? Thank you. And yes, any other comments following on Councillor Shanks' comments on item 9? Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I didn't take offense with the letter at all. I read it that they do see the impact of having additional residents close to their downtown area, and they just hope we move it forward quickly. That's how I read it. So I didn't read any more into it than that.
Councillor Shanks.
Article on the paper was fairly explicit in terms of explaining why we had to take them back to third reading. And as I say, just a phone call to their liaison or a senior staff member would have given that information.
Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, these are the kinds of letters, how, even though we may react in a similar fashion that you usually see from the Chamber of Commerce because of the fact that they represent all businesses in the District of Sechelt on many different levels and they're member funded. This is a little different because I had thought through our discussions and the liaison work that we do with the SDBA and the work that they do in our community that they're a marketing organization of the downtown. So it's a little bit different. So, that's all I'm going to say about that, but I will, when I get a chance, have a conversation with a couple of their members about the letter. Thanks.
Is that enough on that one? Okay. Anything, any other letters or correspondence you'd like to? No emergency items, no release of in-camera items. I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Lutz, Councillor Seegers, Councillor Inkster, all in favor? Thank you very much. Pam, how are you tonight?